To backtrack a little bit, and to maybe focus on your own trajectory, how would you say it? How does it unfold up to this stage, and what does it mean to you in terms of your trajectory as a curator? I mean, I'm not thinking necessarily only in terms of stature, but also in terms of development of your ability to change things ultimately.
The building is such a challenge. It's sort of to think of an exhibition for there in itself brings certain questions that are very much conditioned by the building. It's you couldn't just do anything, or you couldn't just bring anyone to it somehow. It's so there was sort of a, for me, never really a huge, well, I didn't have really a huge sort of conviction that I needed to do something in Venice or wanted to do something in Venice. And I figured maybe at some point it would there would be a work or an artist's work that would trigger it. And this is what happened in this case. Because of the exhibition on projections that we did in 2007, I started to look at all of Mark's work as part of the research, and I was really struck by the way he deals with a specific moment of modernity, and how he looks at architecture as part of his interests in cinema. And there was just something that between the architectural moment of the Pavilion and his work that there was some kind of a synergy. And even though he doesn't do installations, it's the content of his work. I thought there's something that pertains to this in a very particular way. And it was quite amazing how something that I didn't know when we applied first, that there's something started to sort of happen in references that had kind of bore out that sort of, maybe it's an intuition or something, but the Pavilion was built in 1958. Mark was born in 1958. It sort of describes a certain high moment of the international style of modernism, of a kind of internationalization of the beginning of the globalization of the world. In Toronto, where Mark did or started his early work and was strongly involved in questions of art and public spaces, and the city as a kind of urban geography. The Mississauga buildings came into place. The Nathan Phillips Square, which is sort of iconic international modernism. The City Hall built by Virgil Ravel. John Parkin's Airport, the first Terminal 1, which was the first aerokey or the first circular airport that was built, where Mark had already shot films. And it turns out Mark had been, a lot of the works that he had done over the past years involved Toronto, which was something I hadn't really registered until I was doing this more intense research. And then, so there were kind of really strong interest in a particular moment. All of this the period of architecture that he was looking at seems to sort of be from around that time, or looks at that certain moment as a historical moment, as one that is past, that is being superseded at the moment by others, and at the same time sort of is on the cusp of either being heritage or being falling into a state of disrepair. A certain type of modernism is kind of disappearing from the urban landscape, and so a number of films focus on industrial buildings that are now out of commission, and so on. And so out of this research and out of the way Mark's interests developed, he found out, for instance, that Viljo Revel's Nathan Phillips Square and City Hall, the jury for that project included one of the architects from the Italian Pavilion. So there was a kind of international synergy that had kind of brought this moment into the present somehow in Toronto, so these kinds of things converged in the project, and the project in a way is a kind of a thinking about that. So I would have never known any of these things in advance, but at an intuitive level, just how the pavilion works as a building, as a kind of pavilion architecture, kind of prototypical pavilion architecture in a sense, a glazed, one entire glazed facade, the curtain window, its kind of leanings on international, or the international style and high modernism, and the pursuit of history and modernity in Mark's work, all of that kind of fit. And so from a point of view of curatorial work, that sometimes, I couldn't have predicted it, but it was something that is incredibly rewarding to see how that sort of then bears out, how an intuition and an artist's work kind of probe that even further and unearth things that you wouldn't have known in advance. So I think that Mark's project will contribute something new to the pavilion, something old and something new.